Welcome back to a special edition of Sunrise Daily, Nigeria at 59, this day, October 1st. Well, let's go down memory lane for a while. Well, we've spoken so much about the dream of our founding fathers, so we'll just give you some quotes of what some of them said, where their minds were at the time. Well, Sir Abubakar Tafawa Balewa did deliver an Independence Day speech, and he says, there you go, today is Independence Day. He says it's a wonderful day, and it is all the more wonderful because we have awaited it with increasing impatience, compelled to watch one country after another overtaking us on the road when we had so nearly reached our goal, but now we've acquired a rightful status, and I feel sure that history will show that the building of our nation proceeded at the wisest pace. It has been thorough, and Nigeria now stands well built upon firm foundation. That was at the time. Okay, well, we also do have that of Dr. Nnamdi Azikiwe, his speech as well on October 1960. Hospitals and health centers outnumber those of any other country in Africa. The total mileage of our tarred and untarred roads measure up with the best in Africa. Our economy is expanding in the agricultural and industrial sectors, and we are busily engaged in stimulating investments so as to increase earning opportunities for our people. But we also do have that of Chief Awolowo.
Yeah, it's a part of a speech by Chief Obafemi Awolowo to Western leaders of thought in May 1967. And it says, the aim of a leader should be the welfare of the people whom he leads. I have used welfare to denote the physical, mental and spiritual well-being of the people. It's a continuing decimal as far as leadership is concerned, wouldn't you say? You know.
Yeah, but you know, there's been messages too from the current leaders. The Speaker of the House of Reps, Honorable Femi Gbajabiamila, did issue a statement on Nigeria's Day saying, as we mark our country's 59th independence anniversary, we must remain steadfast, united and prayerful for our country to remain one and overcome her challenges. It is also incumbent on us all as citizens to pray for our leaders so that God Almighty will continue to guide them aright. Let us all work together as one people. In the face of some of the challenges confronting us as a country, we have no choice but to work hard enough to overcome them. As leaders, we are always doing that, but we need the support of the citizens to achieve that. That's from the Speaker.
Well, let's take another message from the Governor of Katsina State, Aminu Bello Masari, and this is what he has to say regarding Nigeria's 59th independence anniversary. He says, in the race towards building a better, stronger and more united nation, we should not allow divisive sentiments to pull the baton out of our hands. We should do well to realize that whatever affects one part of Nigeria affects all of Nigeria, and it is in the interest of us all to collectively face any challenge affecting a section of the country, as doing otherwise will only give room for the challenge to envelop the whole country. He goes on to say the issue of banditry and other security challenges has nothing to do with politics, religion or ethnicity, because criminality neither knows nor respects boundaries. So that's the message from the Governor of Katsina State, Aminu Masari.
Good thing that everyone is talking about that. I mean, now that we're looking at the good all the time. Okay, so this is from the former Vice President of Nigeria and presidential candidate of the People's Democratic Party in the last election, Alhaji Atiku Abubakar, who sent in messages and expresses his worries. He says, and I quote, October 1, 1960, our nation's founding fathers could never have fathomed that 59 years after birthing the largest black nation on earth, we would be facing a situation where we do not have a free press, our judiciary being under attack, and our youths and activists, who should ordinarily be the future of Nigeria, would be facing the very real threat of arrest and intimidation should they speak out about the state of the nation. That's from the Vice President. And a number of other things, of course, it continues. We could go on and on.
Okay, well, yes, indeed.
Former Vice President.
Former Vice President.
So, well, yes, we're also going to move on and keep focusing on this day. Security is a key theme for today. Yes, the president did speak about that, among several other things. But we do have two gentlemen joining us now from Abuja. We've got Dr. Dan Moe. Well, he is a political scientist, but he specializes, his PhD actually did specialize in public policy analysis and African politics. He did join the presidency in 1989, where his position included Director, Narcotics, Drugs Control, Director, Special Duties, Director, Monitoring and Evaluation, and later appointed the Secretary, National Poverty Eradication Program. He also served as Director, Nigeria Air Force, and Director, Human Resources, Ministry of Defense, as well as Director, Human Resources, Inspectorate and Management Services, Ministry of Foreign Affairs. He further served as Special Advisor, National Security Affairs, to the National Security Advisor in the presidency under 3 consecutive Nigerian governments. Dr. Moe, thank you for joining us this morning on the program.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Yeah, and then here in our Lagos studios, we do have Reverend Laddie Thompson. He's a strategic security consultant and researcher. Well, yes, if you remember, he was also the special advisor conflict resolution matters related to terrorism for CAN since 2010 to date. He's a consultant at Macedonian Institute from 1999 till date. He also was the CEO of Top Marks Overseas Enterprise from 1990 to 1995. He's a PhD holder, social engineering from Omolobi Research and Development Institute. Thank you, and good to see you again this morning, sir.
Pleasure is always mine.
Well, let me go over to Dr. Moe and start with his since Dr. Moe, yes, lots of people on this day, it's always mixed feelings. Sometimes people retrospect, introspect, and try to look ahead and see how good or otherwise the future is. But speaking about security, I mean, we do know how important that is in all spheres of our lives. Give us your impression of where you think we are concerning security in this country and tie it to perhaps the dream of our founding fathers and the well-being and welfare of this country as we progress.
Well, I think that's very important, because we should realize that the fact that Nigeria is, and Nigeria is still one country, is a credit to the fact that we have done relatively very well. The issue is that if we put into context the challenges that have confronted Nigeria, including the Civil War, in fact, beginning with the 1996, the 1966 coup and counter coup, and the Nigerian Civil War, and the other challenges we have had, we should in some sense commend ourselves, because we have taken actions that have still been able to keep this nation, as one country. That is an indication that we have succeeded tremendously in remaining one nation. That is not to say that we have not had challenges, or as a matter of fact, we do not have challenges now. In some sense, I can understand why most people feel disappointed that as of this point, our national integration, national unity, and economic development are still at a rudimentary level. If you put into context the resources at our disposal, human resources, material resources, natural resources, and our performance, has been a big disappointment, so I can understand that. But within the general context, we're at least one nation together. And it's possible that if we would reorganize ourselves very well, we should be able to come out of even the challenges that are confronting us now. So the critical areas really are the areas we need to focus upon. Because after several years of independence, large resources from everywhere, including from the oil and other natural resources, and with the billions that Nigeria have gotten over the years, to have a large population of 71% in poverty as of this point. According to the National Bureau of Statistics, I can understand why people are depressed about it. To be in a situation where we have so many bad roads, where our social infrastructure is not good, where a lot of our youth are on the street, where we have not accomplished much in the area of education given the resources. So the critical issue really is that there seems to be a disappointment, not just among Nigerians, but also among the international community. Why a country like Nigeria that in 1960 had the greatest promise in Africa, not just to be an African giant, but also to be a major player in the World Community of Nations, is still grappling with this kind of issues. But I think we need to commend ourselves. We are still together as a nation. What we really need to do now is to reorganize ourselves and re-strategize and move ahead.
Is it comforting that for you, Reverend Thompson, that we are together as a nation, even though we are as we are?
The word comforting, I don't know really. I think we'd better look at it this way. A farmer is not surprised if after 6 weeks tomatoes produce. If yam, I think about 6 months or 3 years. Cocoa, 5 years. Where Nigeria is today is not a surprise to many people. And I say this positively because Nigeria, like any other nation in the world, is a program.
When you say where Nigeria is today, it's not a surprise. What are you saying?
What I'm establishing for you is that on the 1st of October in 1960, what was handed over to us was an exam paper. And we had invigilators, those who handed over power to Nigeria. And what they had done was that they had set an exam for us to see whether we would understand the key factor in nation building, which Dubai has mastered now, which is what? Programming. Nigeria was programmed to be where it is right now. If you listen to the comments of Tafawa Balewa on the 7th of October in 1960, combine it with what Obafemi Awolowo said in 1968, when he said you cannot debate that Nigeria was created by the British, and whatever the British created was handed over whole-hearted to us at independence. But what they handed over to us had within it the forces of its own disintegration. And it had the presence of mind to establish the fact that there were 3 tasks ahead of Nigerian leaders. Number 1, he said, was that we needed to neutralize those forces of disintegration. Number 2, we needed to preserve a Nigerian heritage. And then number 3, we needed to make Nigerians prosperous, forward-looking, and the people who have a hope. Now, Nnamdi Azikiwe made the same statement in a more pessimistic way, though. But the bottom line is this, is that everybody recognized that we inherited something at the foundation of Nigeria that had flaws in it. Now, the challenge is this. Until African leaders, because this is not something that affects us in Nigeria alone. In fact, I think we have cause to rejoice because as a leading nation in Africa, we are getting to the point now where we'll either make up our minds to become the leading nation of Africa or surrender to failure. So the truth is this, the only problem we have is programming. And programming is something that no nation ever shares. America is a program.
So
Britain is a program.
Forgive me.
Nigeria is a program.
You talked about the forces of integration. I was just wondering, have we been able to identify disintegration?
Yeah.
Forces of disintegration. Have we been able to identify them, and what are we doing about them?
Look, any strategic thinker looking at the case of Nigeria will tell you point blank that first of all, Tubman Goldie, who was the architect of Nigeria, came here in 1877. He modeled Nigeria's foundation after the East Indian Company, which was a colonial construct. It was not meant to succeed as... In fact, let me put it for you like this. Go and study chaos theory, which is the study of how a system moves from chaos to order, or from order to chaos. Now, you will find out that in some cases where you see chaos, you'll discover there's some order in the disorder. Some order causing the disorder. Now, the younger generation will tell you that a double rod pendulum or a triple rod pendulum will generate what looks like chaos. But you would never believe that this chaos was being generated deliberately. And to cure the chaos, all you need to do is to straighten the pendulum. Now, Nigeria is a perfect example of the application of that chaos engineering. This is what was handed over to us, like many other nations of the world. What we have just failed to do is that you cannot outsource thinking. The architecture of thought that is required to handle Nigeria is not something that will be found in the streets, and it's not something that is taught in schools. So the place where we are right now is not surprising. Where we will continue to go to is not surprising until we locate the fact that when we were put together and we were granted our quote independence on the 1st of October, it was an exam paper. And we were meant to answer them correctly. But since that time till date, we haven't answered the questions correctly.
Do we understand the question?
I want to believe that if you remember what I said, divide and rule, religious conflicts, a whole lot of things were put into the foundation of the country. Let me put it like this. Nigeria is like a kitchen that has in it a cooker, it has a stove, it has gas, it has pots and pans, frying pans, it has tomatoes, it has onions, it has vegetables, it has condiments, but there's no stew. Now, how long would it take us to discover that there's nothing wrong with the people of Nigeria, there's nothing wrong with the land of Nigeria? The challenge that we have in Nigeria is simple. There is a program running in Nigeria that has to be neutralized. Let me take you to this. It's like this. There's an Igbo enculturation program in Nigeria. There's a Hausa enculturation program. There's a Yoruba enculturation program. Enculturation programs are simply, the methods by which we learn the competencies of a culture, verbal, non-verbal. Now, when a baby arrives in this world, is neither Igbo, Yoruba, nor Hausa. The enculturation program turns him into a Hausa man or a Yoruba man or whatever. Now, there's also a Nigerian enculturation, which we inherited. The unfortunate thing is that the engineers who handed over to us deliberately engineered Nigeria in such a way that the cultural nations within would compete, the religions would compete, a lot of fault lines in terms of, wealth distribution as well. And then what they did now was to ensure that the Nigerian enculturation program itself is corrupt. It was corrupt from the beginning. So what Nigeria has done is to focus on fighting corruption as a crime. And we are getting to the point where we are realizing that there's nothing wrong with all of us. It's just that we have a corrupt enculturation program producing corrupt Nigerians.
Well, we'll go to break, but when we return, we'll see how do we connect that with federalism, federating units, and then Dr. Moore will also give us the thinking of government. Do they understand this program? And if they do we have people who are doing it? Or is it that somebody is just hacking the system and corrupting it? Stay with us.
The Western region was one of the most prosperous regions in Nigeria, even before the country's independence in 1960. Efforts had been on to welcome a new nation meant to be sovereign in all respects. Some of the notable pre-independence efforts began with the creation of the Mapo Hall, with its foundation laid in 1925 by the then President of Oyo Province, Captain Ross, and opened for use in 1929 by Sir Graham Thompson to serve as the meeting point for the political, administrative, and traditional hierarchy in the Western region. The imposing Mapo Hall was later complemented by the first of a parliamentary structure in the country, the Parliament Buildings, which was commissioned by Sir John Rankin in 1955. Both buildings are still standing. Having put a political structure in place, next was education, and this gave birth to the first institution in Nigeria, the University of Ibadan, in 1948. The University College Hospital Ibadan was established in 1957 to serve as a training hub for medicine in Africa. It stands as the first tertiary health facility in the nation.
There was a center of excellence in the whole of the Commonwealth. Starting at 1956, a Saudi prince came to UCH for medical treatment. It was so rated. Now you're not sure there'll be light. You're not sure they will have water. All of these things deteriorated in our very before.
And just before independence in 1959, the first television station in Africa got its heart beating to the admiration of all, the Western Nigeria Broadcasting Service and Western Nigeria Television. WNBS and WNTV came to life. Post-independence, the first tallest building in Nigeria and indeed West Africa was built from the proceeds of cocoa, rubber and timber. The 105-meter skyscraper, which has 25 floors, became a pride of the nation.
We hope that we'll be able to manage their economy, use our resources, our cocoa, our oil palm, our rubber, our groundnut, the pyramids and so on, all evaporated.
The landmarks in Ibadan, the Oyo State capital, though well worn with age, are still standing. But the question is, are the legacies for which they were left still discernible?
Welcome back to our special edition of Sunrise Daily Nigeria at 59. Well, let's get to Dr. Mo. Well, you did hear what Reverend Thompson did say about this program. Well, yes, there are several others who think that when at least this was bequeathed to Nigeria, federating units, the impression some had was, look, they didn't want one part to be greater than the sum of all the other parts. But with specific reference to this program, you've been in government, you served in national security and several other departments in government. Do you think that, does government have, or at the time you did serve, did they have this mindset in terms of ensuring that we do have what we can refer to as one, a national ethos and drive all federating units to that singular agenda?
Well, I think that it will not be fair 59 years after independence for us to be blaming the structure that the British left for us. We should also realize that it would be expecting too much to have expected a colonial power that did not want to leave and was forced to leave to give you the best structure you wanted. But I think that since independence, we have had enough time and enough opportunity to have adjusted the structure. What has been the key issue is that the Nigerian federal government, not even to talk of the state government, have never had the autonomy or the independence to operate as a federal government. You will realize that what has happened since independence is that whenever each people from a certain section of the country take over the central government, they tend to treat it, rather than being autonomous and working for the overall interests of the whole country, there has always been in the past a tendency to favor a particular region depending on where the government came from. Let me give you an example. When Nigeria took over as an independent country, everybody believed that the 1963 constitution was very nice and favored all the regions. But what happened? As soon as General Goironsi took over power, because it was perceived at that time that the Igbos were in a position to dominate the whole country, he quickly moved the country to a unitary system of government. That affected the original structure. You see, if you have a government that is more interested in the welfare of the various regions, you will realize that it will not even matter very much if you have people from a particular group in charge of the country. What has happened in Nigeria is that the governmental institutions, including even the national security agencies, have not been autonomous. You know, if a government is captured by a certain group or a particular region, you will realize that the policies of such a government can never favor everybody. Or if security agencies are covered by are captured. So you have three structures, really, conceptually speaking. You have an autonomous government that makes decisions in favor of everyone in the country and is able to do good governance and to cater for the basic interests of the country, pursue a particular vision that favors everyone in the country. You can also have a captured government, a situation whereby anyone that becomes the president or which region that produces a president, they see it as an agenda to promote their region. Then you can have a relatively captured government whereby you can come from a region, you are not really to ignore your people, but you should realize that you are living in a context of a federation, and therefore your policy should scatter for all. That was why efforts were made through institutional frameworks and constitutional frameworks, such as the federal character. But what has happened now is that Nigeria has been unfortunate to the level where we have not been able to come out with a specific vision and a specific position. So in the absence of a national vision, it has been extremely difficult. But to go direct to your question, have we been able to use the regions in such a way that the federal government has not just become the most dominant power, as he was trying to argue? I think that what we came out, started with General Agüey to have a unitary system of government, has tended to persist even after the democracy was returned, even in 1999. The constitution we have, you know, was made by the military. That is why, to a large extent, I agree with those who believe that there may be need for a constitutional rearrangement to set the focus and the vision that Nigeria is to follow. As it is now, is a little bit haphazard. And I think that was the essence for the 2014 need for Nigerians to come together as delegates to the Constitutional Conference and to the Constituency Conference. But the point is that Nigerians have not been able to sit down and come up with a framework that will better suit them. For instance, part of the problems we have now in national security, each and every one of us knows that if you have a federal system where the federating unit, and in our own case, the state, have no form of power at their disposal. For instance, they have not even the ordinary police. You realize that to control security, a governor has to apply to Abuja, even when they have a challenge on ground. So everybody knows now that to be able to deal even with our security situation, we need now to at least allow the state some autonomy to have their own police. Even though we have not officially allowed it, everybody knows that every state has some kind of a vigilante, and they are spending money on some kind of a vigilante. But
those issues that you raised, let me bring Reverend Thompson here, because, I mean, because those who think that, wait a minute, they should know the program. But all of this that we seem to be playing on are ways that maybe politicians or those in government just seem to leverage on to keep dividing the country, but it doesn't appear that we still understand the program.
Honestly, I would have loved to agree with him. But when I look at the amount of bloodshed, I look at the suffering of children across this country, I'm prone to ask a few questions. Number one, how many years does it take a lie to turn into a truth by itself? How long does it take a faulty foundation to turn in by itself, to auto-correct itself into a viable foundation? If you want to build a 25-story building and you lay the foundation of a bungalow, how many years must you wait until the foundation strengthens itself for you to now build a 25-story building? Let me give you a few examples of what I mean. When we were moving towards independence, the British formed what they call the CRO, the Commonwealth Relations Office. That's a place where I think Nigeria needs to invest a lot more in terms of research, because we may just discover a few things. Let me give you one very simple example of these things. Leadership in any community rises and falls. Progress rises and falls with leadership. Now, if you take a community and you fracture deliberately, their leadership selection program. If you fracture deliberately the leadership selection program, it means that that system will never have the best leaders. It will have to select its leaders based on what it has inherited. Now, you need to understand this, that we are dealing with masters at the game. Although things have changed, I'm very grateful to the British. I mean, I will fight for us to have being a francophone country. But I'm taking us back to the fact that if you keep trying to build a skyscraper without understanding that foundations never autocorrect, you are going to waste your time. The West African Frontier Force was started in 1897 or so. You are dealing with masters of the game. They understood the psyche of the African. They could see ahead before us. Amalgamation was in 1914. But the Nigerian army came out of the West African Frontier Force. Now, if you look all over Africa, you begin to see the pattern of the program. You see, the challenge is that people don't know the difference between programming and restructuring. You see, anywhere you see form, function, structure, aesthetic value, interdependencies, cyclical results, anywhere you see certain, symptoms like that, you can know straight away you are dealing with a programmer. The failure of Nigeria, no, African nations, our consistent failure is totally unnatural. It is the product of a program.
But okay, go on. Just a moment. I'm just curious. I mean, who stands to benefit from this sort of chaos? I mean, you have said that even in chaos, there's some form of pattern, there's a form of order. So who stands to benefit in keeping this chaotic state?
Look, it was just global history. In 1776, America inherited the same kind of foundation. You see, nobody goes through the program of slavery, apartheid or colonialism and all these things without coming out with inferiority complexes. Look at all of you gentlemen, not in ties around your necks.
You should see us on weekends, though.
You know.
I know. What I'm trying to point out to you is that the dexterity. I mean, you all have Windsor knots. The Windsor knot, it requires a lot of dexterity to tie it. Nobody can just jump out of the bush and come and tie a Windsor knot like this. Now, for you to be able to do this, there had to have been a transculturation. And the truth is this, is that if we look at our nation, we have a predilection for certain tastes. What I'm trying to point out to you is this, is that right from the beginning, the people who programmed us, let me put it in a more benign way. When America got its independence, did you notice that Americans refused to play football and invented American football instead? They refused to drink tea. They began to drink coffee. They refused to put on, they put on their khaki pants and informal dressing. They even chose to drive on a different side of the road, even when it comes to electricity alone. While you use 240 volts, they choose 110 volts. Do you think Americans were stupid? No. They realized that if you don't care what has been programmed into you, I'm talking about programming now. If you don't care what has been programmed into you, you will not have an economy.
Americans agreed to do that.
1776,
to themselves.
They laid a program.
Good.
First of all.
At what point did we, or do you think we ever have gotten to the point where we say, let's rewrite the program ourselves?
We are tempted to. Let us come this year, finally, if we want to tell the truth to the entire nation this year. Nigeria does not have founding fathers. Nigeria has liberation fathers. What founding fathers do is to lay a foundation for a successful structure and a building. The liberation fathers of Nigeria, if you go and read all their notes, and these men were intelligent men of a cadre and level that is rare to come by in the country today. These men emphasized the fact that they were not allowed. Go and listen to Tafawa Balewa's speech. Go and hear him talk about intractable problems. Go and hear him project into the future where we are today in 1960.
No, that's Kiretu said the same thing.
In 1964
as well. Yeah.
So, as long as we continue to discountenance architecture of thought, and we continue to emote, and we think we can just, bludgeon our way through, we are dealing with nations who understand something. Let me tell you what an enculturation program is. Everybody knows that children.
I was going to just come in, and my colleague is waiting in Abuja, but we'll come to this because this is a conversation we also we brought up last week about the founding fathers, how strong they were originally? Were they able to
They
trust?
were not founding fathers.
So we'll come to that when we'll come back in just a moment. But let's get to Gloria Umezike. She is in Abuja, where they're going to have some activities to commemorate this day. Hello, Gloria.
Hello, Chamberlain. Can you hear me?
Yeah, so tell us, what is going to happen anytime from now?
Okay, so we're live at the forecourt of the presidential villa, where the presidential guards of parade is already in progress. We saw earlier the guards, mountain parade. They came on the forecourt, and they're all spread out here, hundreds of them. And we're already awaiting dignitaries who will be arriving any moment from now. Already we're seeing the cabinet members. We're expecting the vice president. We're expecting the speaker of the House of Representatives. We're expecting the president of the Senate, service chiefs, cabinet members, leadership of various ministries, departments, and agencies. We're also expecting some former governors. It's going to be a full complement today, and we know that relatively low-key occasion is something Nigerians might be looking forward to. Another year Nigeria is marking with a lot of promises. We heard this morning the president say that, there's still light at the end of the tunnel. And so this celebration is in line with what we've been experiencing since 2010. The jinx was sort of broken last year on the 58th independence anniversary, where the president went to the Eagle Square. Everything held there. We saw the full military hardware and all of that happen. But this year it's right here, and as a matter of fact, we're expecting this event to kick off a few minutes from now. The president will arrive, and we will be seeing the President mount the saluting dais and receive a national salute, conduct of change of guards, silent drill display, special rifle display, 21-gun salute, and then cutting of the anniversary cake. All of this will happen within 2 hours. Later today, we'll be, of course, witnessing the Independence Day dinner, where the Vice President will be given a speech or a lecture to wrap up the day nicely. Chamberlain.
Gloria, and we will just keep tabs when much later in the program. But Reverend Thompson, we refer to them as founding fathers in spite of all this stuff for you. Say, no, that shouldn't be the case. So go ahead, tell us.
I think the younger generation of Nigerians will appreciate this better because they're the ones suffering the most. In fact, the truth is that there are older generations who stand the risk of becoming anachronisms because there's a modern world outside of Nigeria that is moving at the speed of light. And what we're doing in Nigeria is arresting the development of our younger ones. Now, who is a foundation father? A foundation father is different from a liberating father. A liberating father helps you to break shackles and bonds. A founding father helps you to lay the foundation for a prosperous nation.
And they didn't do that.
They could not do it. And if you do just a little bit of research and find out that all these men saw their limitations and they projected into the future and spoke about these days. In 1960, I said to you, Tafawa Balewa made a speech in New York at the General Assembly of the United Nations. Go and read his speech. It is there in black and white. Obafemi Awolowo in 1958 also said the same thing. He said, I have a foreboding. Something terrible is ahead. And why did he say this? I'll give you a good example of what founding fathers do. Now, since Nigeria is supposed to be an American-style democracy, in laying your foundation for a nation, and you're bringing disparate groups together, one of the wisest things you can do is to make sure that it is not a shotgun wedding. You make sure that it is voluntary. And how did they achieve that? If you go and read the American Declaration of Independence, 1776, which starts by saying we hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal. First of all, giving value to the life of the citizen, number one. Then giving you the promise that you can max out on your potentials, your happiness, and all that. But that's not the issue now. The issue now is this, is that if you read the American Declaration of Independence, you'll find out that it also contains the words that if any government is found to be negating all these things that we are laying out in our foundation, then it is the duty of the people to rise up and get rid of that government and replace it with one that will serve the purpose for which that American Declaration of Independence was written. And that's why it can be addressed as we the people of America.
Okay, Dr. Mo, but this is part of what that those who have consistently said, look, we don't have this, because if we do, then you'll have everybody pulling in the same direction, and not that those federating units or ethnicity or tribe will always be highlighted far above that Nigerianness, if we could refer to that as such. Do you share at least what Reverend Thompson has said here, that we don't have that at the moment?
No, I agree totally with Reverend Thompson that we will need a framework that is much more solid than the desperate one we have now to move forward. But the point also needs to be emphasized that America that he's talking about came out of a civil war, and after having fought the British, and after that sat down to formulate a platform. That is the kind of platform that I'm talking about. In Nigeria, that platform was distorted when the military took over power. And of course, when the military were handing over power back to civilians in 1999, they made what you can call a temporary document, which was the 1999 Constitution. For us to have a solid foundation of the kind Reverend Thompson is talking about would require something like that they tried to do under President Goodluck Jonathan. You know, when people were invited in 2014 to the Constitutional Assembly, the essence was for them to come out with a document, and that document was to be a foundation that when the civilians come together, they will be able to have a document that Nigerians can buy into it. But I realized that the 2014 discussions and agreements that delegates came to Abuja and agreed upon is still lying on the shelf. And what is being operated now is a constitution that was handed over by the military when they were, as a matter of fact, hurriedly left.
Let me ask this, before you go further than that. I just want to take you back to when you say what came about during the Civil War for Americans, but in our own case, you said we lost that when the military took over. But we know that military intervention, but they had intervened before the Civil War and were still there after the Civil War. So at what point, what's the correlation?
No, the correlation here is that when the military handed over power to us in 1999, Nigerians ought to have come together, as they did in 2014, to reformulate the Nigerian Constitution or revise it to have a solid document which you can now say we the people. But remember that we've been operating the 1999 Constitution that was handed over to us by the military. And this 1999 Constitution was centralist in orientation. The powers were concentrated, which is typical of military rule. Military rule tends to concentrate power at the center. And that is why we have a situation where we now have states that do not have any power of any kind. They have to take reference from even though they are supposed to be a federal system and they are supposed to be semi-autonomous. So what is required, we cannot run away, we can keep on running away, but until we sit down together and look maybe at the recommendations of 2014 and revise our Nigerian Constitution and come out with a document that reflects the aspirations of Nigerians to which all can aspire, we will continue to have this kind of crisis that we are having up to now. That is why I was talking that kind of government can come about when such a document has, then you have a government that is put in place that is autonomous. It's not captured by one particular region, one particular ethnic group, or one particular religious group. But there has to be a legal foundational framework that will guide such a government. That was what the federal character was intended to do. The federal character was supposed to set guidelines so that whoever is in power behaves within a certain context that is accommodating of all the other regions. So we have to take things like that very seriously. That is why I'm saying that 1999 had the democratic return of Nigeria was an opportunity to sit down and form a solid foundation upon which we can now build this country. That is yet to be established. And until we realize that and do that, we will still be having the kind of problems we are having now.
Dr. Mo, you said the other time in passing, you said the 1999 Constitution is a temporary document. Was there any time where you represented this to any of the three governments, under which you worked, that look, that something solid needed to be done to have a permanent document, that Nigeria can be guided by?
Oh, naturally. You probably need to know that under Abacha, I was even the officer in the presidency that was overseeing the Constituent Assembly. Why do you think Nigerian governments, each and every one of them, have always called a constitutional conference or a Constituent Assembly? The reason is because they also know, we know in government that document, that is why even under President Jonathan, they were brought together to form a national document. But you realize that what has been our problem is that when that particular government or that particular military regime came together, I have served under 3 different presidents, so I can talk and say that. Because I know what each one of them called people together to come up with such a document. So if your question is, did we recommend that? Yes, we did. And I'm recommending that until you do that, you will still have the same problems we are having now. We need to sit together and work on that document. President Jonathan was working on that document, that 2014 recommendations that were made. We need to, this government under President Muhammadu Buhari needs to look at that document. Because until we look at it and try to put the things together, you will realize that we'll have a shaky foundation, as Reverend Thompson is talking.
All right, Dr. Mo, in speaking about solutions now, but let me just highlight this. When he says that was what the federal character tried to bring, and I'm just wondering, because if I understand your point, it looks as if it's a little beyond the federal character, because if the federal character was that rallying point, if they go against it, you will have Nigerians rise in unison and go against it and say, no, this is not what is supposed to be. But perhaps in general context, when he then says each government tries to call a conference, is that their attempt to say, okay, well, we recognize that we don't have this program to pull us together, or are they playing politics?
They're not playing politics. I want to believe that every government we've had has been manned by people who ultimately find out that they are riding the back of a tiger. So when the people start out, watch all the governments we've had. I don't think there are any really evil men who've taken power. But you see, this is what it takes me to, that because of the younger generation, I need to emphasize again the difference between programming and restructuring. Yeah. Now, let us look at the issue of the Constitution, like he has mentioned. The Nigerian Constitution is about 66,600 and something words. We practice an American-style democracy, so let me go to America again. Minus amendments, the American Constitution is 4,400 words. Ours is 66,000 plus. Now, the truth is this, it's not a matter of words. What we are agreeing upon now is there's something on which a constitution rests. That which the constitution rests upon is this national program. For instance, I'll ask you, let's address this quickly. An Almajiri who is in Kaduna, each time I see these guys, my heart is torn. What has Nigeria done for him? What enculturation program makes him a Nigerian? What is the connection between himself and a waterside boy in Ijoland? You see, the point is this. The nations of the world who put together programs understand something. The future of every nation depends on how you treat your young. You find out that between age 0 and 6, children are open. And the character of most children is formed by the time they are 6 years old. So if a nation does not intervene directly in the life of its citizens to make sure that a part of the mind of every child has a recognition of the nation being the overarching protection that the child has by age 6, trust me, whatever is learning by the time he's 12, 13, 14, 15 is a waste of time. If you ask the experts in that area, they will let you know that a child up to age 6 can learn 3 languages at the same time. After age 6, it becomes a struggle. So what every nation of the world knows is this: you program your children with a national enculturation program. This is not offered in any university of the world. It takes the thinkers in a nation. In America, it was only 7 men at the core of what we call the American dream.
Okay,
It's a
you were
program.
going to talk about the difference between restructuring.
Yes,
Program.
and programming. You see, restructuring that people call for is just a rearrangement of structural elements.
Such as?
Oh, well, okay, let's just look at the program of sharing revenue, the program for doing this, like the federal character that we mentioned. I mean, we want to find a more equitable balance between the nations, between the regions, between this, and rotate this and that. Now, there's a statement you need to go and research. I think it's days of Patrick Henry, if you go and do your research in America. He says, we are Virginians no more, we are now Americans. Now, what makes a man who was formerly an Igbo, who is an Igbo man, say that before I'm an Igbo man, I am first in Nigeria? It is because there must be a program that consciously protects you, provides for you, injects something into you that offers you much more than your cultural enculturation. You see, for instance, some nations of the world today, their children get free milk, medical health care is practically free. Their children, in fact, something happened to one of my friends who was traveling, carried a baby. They got to an airport, they said, all Americans this way, all other persons sleep in the airport. And she said, my baby is American. Does that apply? I said, because you are carrying an American baby, move to this side. They went to lodge them in a hotel. So you see the valuation. If you don't begin to place value on the life of a child by a certain age and tie it to something that a country is doing, it's going to be impossible after a certain age for him not to lean on what has provided him with his identity.
Isn't this rearrangement that they're calling for going to lead to us getting the programming right? Because if people now subscribe to a national ideology, that can take us there, can't it?
Honestly, let me say something to you. There are some things that we need to look at and realize that what programming does is that it changes you from the inside. What the restructure does is to rearrange things on the outside. And you're going to find out something. As long as you have a corrupt enculturation program, you will continue to produce corruption, which will only increase the competition.
What's the way out now?
Yeah.
My God, I'll give you what the way out is. When it comes to chaos engineering, the solution is always what they call algorithms. We have to sit down and locate the algorithms that Nigeria needs right now. What I'm trying to point out right now is that don't blame any leader from all the way from independence till date. We were beaten by masters of the game. Okay? So if we want to get the solution, I'll give you an example. I've given you this before. In 1970 something, there was a game called the Rubik's Cube. I don't know if you remember it. Yeah. We were in college then. Once you upset the harmony of that color, of the color of that cube, you will never put it back together again by yourself. It has 43 quintillion options. It was designed for you to fail to put it back. However, now watch this amazing thing. If you go online or somebody talks to you and teaches you the algorithms, that cube that your grandfather could not solve, he gave it to the son, he will not solve it, the grandson cannot solve it, up to 7 generations. In 7 minutes, anybody of average intelligence will solve that cube. That's where Nigeria is. So the first thing first is this. We must accept, first of all, that we do not have founding fathers. There's still an opportunity for us to have founding fathers. We must celebrate our liberation fathers, but we must now locate our founding fathers. We need to accept to ourselves that a foundation will not auto-correct itself. Now, having done that, we need to go back to the comments. How do we now deal with the divisions and the centrifugal forces that were packaged into things? Now, things are so bad right now that the first thing we actually need to do is to introduce something to encourage dialogue across the nation. And that's what I call non-violent communication. Non-violent communication is going to be the work of the media. But a total all-media approach on non-violent communication says what? Bring communication to a level where we remove emotions, remove sentiments, See, there's so much confusion today with everybody just fake news, talking all sorts of things all over the place. But if we create a standard for communication that helps, is also called compassionate communication. The laws of nonviolent communication are available in the Yoruba, in the Igbo, the Hausa, in practically all African cultures.
Right.
We should make it national.
All right, Dr. Mo, when you suggested a solution and you referenced the 2014 document, but we already know the response of some persons who think that, look, if we were not part of that, how do you want us to implement that? So how can that be the solution?
I'm not saying that that document has to be implemented the way it is. There may even be no need now to call another constitutional conference. We have our legislatures in place. My view is that all such documents should be given to our National Assembly and the House of Rep and the Senate. And the other people at the level of the state and the state assemblies can also make their discussions and inputs. And delegations will be sent to Abuja to hold sessions with the National Assembly, or they may even go around the country to revise that 2014 document to arrive at something that is acceptable to Nigerians. I believe with him that acculturation is possible, but under a national context, you must have a legal framework, the fundamental law that becomes the minimum that provides a guidance for that acculturation. Acculturation cannot take place, or to developing what is known as appropriate political culture cannot take place in a vacuum. Constitutions are usually the basis on which, once agreed upon, everybody else is forced to conform, because Constitution says the framework by which behavior of individuals, organizations, groups can be controlled. So I'm not even asking that there should be a new Constitutional Assembly or a Constitutional Conference. We have delegates elected by us, that, as senators, as House of Reps, as State Assembly, even as local government. So we can hand over all those documents to the Senate or to the National Assembly, and the debate can continue. The people can now send delegations from the various states after discussing with the state assemblies to come to Abuja. Whatever revisions that are agreed upon can now be enacted into a constitution. But we cannot be waiting on some kind of a sociological analysis of cultures to take place. Once we agree that these are what we want, it can be codified into a document. A constitution is basically a codified document.
I'm afraid we'll have to go at this point in time. We do sincerely appreciate your views. Gentlemen, Dr. Dan Mo, you heard him, he's a political scientist. He served under 3 different governments, and we also did have Reverend Laddie Thompson, strategic security consultant and researcher. Thank you as well for coming on this morning. Okay.
Well, my final word would be that there's a difference between a people who have a government and a government that has people. We need to interrogate that and make sure that Nigeria becomes not a government that has people, but a people who have a government.
Food for thought then. But then on the programming note, we do have this for you. A documentary highlighting the views of Nigerians in the diaspora on the occasion of the country's 59th independence anniversary will be on by 4:30 today. Another special program of Nigeria at 59 Securing the Nation will be coming up between 7 and 9:45 p.m. also today. So that is a special edition of Sunrise in Nigeria at 59. We do thank you all for watching. We will see you tomorrow. I'm Chamberlain Uso.
And I'm Kairi Okikiolu.
Have a wonderful celebration on Ayo Makinde.